Good morning. So let me start by saying the high-level view of anger. Anger is one of the three poisons in Buddhism. The three poisons are greed, anger, and delusion. The three are equally detrimental, but anger is considered the most dangerous because of how volatile it is. So there's this saying that one moment of anger can turn everything to ash. Or there's Shantideva starts off the chapter on patience, which is the antidote to anger, with basically that. Let me just find the exact verse for you. So Shantideva invests a whole chapter of the Way of the Bodhisattva on patience, which is really the chapter on anger. Good works gathered in 1,000 ages, such as deeds of generosity or offerings to the Blissful One, a single flash of anger shatters them. No evil is there similar to anger, no austerity to be compared with patience. Steep yourself, therefore, in patience, and always, urgently, with zeal. Those tormented by the pain of anger will never know tranquility of mind. Strangers they will be to every pleasure. Sleep departs them, and they can never rest. So anger is whether or not it's us feeling it or, the society is certainly something that's flashing up right now in our society. And it's a really tricky one to work with. I mean, I guess they're all tricky, but anger right now feels just particularly so. It's impossible to talk about anger without talking about karma. And it's impossible to talk about karma without talking about emptiness. And it's impossible to talk about emptiness without talking about the truth of interdependence. So you can see why this needs more than one talk. It really starts to be complex, but that's the high-level view, is anger hurts us. Anger doesn't only hurt us, it hurts others. We can choose, rather than trying to fix all of the anger of the world, we can choose to quiet our own minds rather than going for the magical solution of, as Shantideva says, covering the entire world with shoe leather. We can cover our own feet with shoe leather, and then we can walk anywhere. So that verse is, where could I find leather enough to cover all the earth? With merely the leather of my shoes, it is as if the entire world is covered. Well, here's the key. There will always be injustice. There will always be things that are not okay. There will always be things that make us anger. But the only thing we can have some control over is how we respond to that. We can control how we respond. And we don't have to become apathetic. We don't have to ignore. But at the same time, we don't have to let it take over and become our anger. So how do we do all of that? That's the trick. That's not really the trick, that's the teachings. And I want to say again, this is accessible to all of us. The antidote to anger is patience. So that's where we start. And that's what we learn, we cultivate, in our practice all the time as we sit. How many times have you been sitting in Zazen and you just really felt like, oh my goodness, I can't take this one more minute. Or, oh my goodness, my mind is crazy today. Or how many times have you just, on the other side, been sitting and you just kind of went, blah, like then the bell rings and you're like, where was I for the past 30 minutes? So those two sides are helping us, many, many things, but one of the things they're helping us to cultivate is the patience to stay here. Anger is really hard to stay present to or to stay with. If we can cultivate that little bit of patience, then we learn that, anger flashes and then it recedes. We can introduce a little bit of patience, then we don't have to jump in and join it. And so that's basically the essence of working with anger right there in that little bit. So very simple, but not really. So then we have to learn all the different ways we can approach anger. And again, as you know, I've talked about this before, but let me just recap a little bit. Of course, taking a pause is always a good thing. Taking a pause allows us to let that anger that's risen to settle a little bit. And, that has a physiological component as well, and that it lets our reptile brain settle down when we feel just so freaked out. And then we can just start to come back into community, into relationship. So working with anger requires being in relationship. And relationship is such a broad word. Relationship, of course, it can mean one person to one person, but it means how we are with the whole world. So we need to have some relationship in order to be able to be present to anger. I was thinking of this, and this is the truth of, interconnectedness right here that I just mentioned, which again, relies on emptiness, which relies on karma. I was thinking a lot this week. So in the events in the Capitol building, there was a time where there was one of our Congress people who's particularly targeted because people didn't like some things that he's done in the last few years. And when he was telling his story, he said as things shut down and the Congress people started being evacuated, his colleagues said, you need to hide, you need to go first. So first of all, they protected him, even though they didn't agree with him. And then one of the, so this was, probably clearly by now a Democratic person, a Democrat. So he goes on out. He's very unsafe, and they get him out. But his colleague says to him, I know these people. I can talk to them. You, not so much. And that line just really stuck with me. I know these people. I can talk to them. What does it mean to know these people? I mean, he didn't mean that he knew them personally. I think he meant he knew how to talk to them. He knew their culture and where they were coming from. So for me, that really brought up a lot of kind of conflicting things. And I thought of myself. I thought, how many times have I said that? And so I was starting to reflect on this. Growing up with people who were angry, and in this case, particularly white men who happened to be my relatives. There were so many times where I felt conflicted, but then felt like I know these people, I can talk to them. So when their anger was directed at me, not so much. And that time I felt, I know these people, why are they hurting me? But then things can get a little more complex. So the things that I was remembering were I had a friend, she sat next to me in band. Her name was Cindy. And we were pretty good friends at school, but because she was a Black girl, I never once went to her house because I grew up in the South. I really liked her. And her coming into band one day for class and saying, "I hate rednecks." And I was like so torn. I'm like, but my brother's a redneck. Oh my goodness. And then she told me what had happened. She was trying to get her books for class, I guess to put back books. And her locker was on the bottom. There was another locker on the top. And this white boy refused to let her get to her locker. He just, for no reason, he doesn't know her really, and he wouldn't let her open her locker. So she wasn't able to put her books up, and she was late for class. So then, etc., etc. She felt so humiliated and dismissed, and she was on the verge of tears, and she was also angry. And then, but I felt defensive. I was like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, but they're not all bad. There are parts of them, they're not all bad, And at the same time, I started to realize that was indefensible. I couldn't justify his behavior towards her. It just felt wrong. I didn't even know who he was. So then why was my impulse to protect him? I know these people. So very conflicted. And then I thought of it the next time. I guess it was about a year later. There was a guy, he wasn't very big. He was in band with us. His name was Archie Davis. And he sat, Cindy and I sat, it's hard on Zoom. Cindy and I sat here in the front, and he was right behind us here because he played the in band. It's like a baritone, but he also could play other things. He could play a French horn, and Archie was considered the best musician in the band. And it was true. When he played music, it just opened your heart. It felt so amazing. And again, I told you he's not very big. So he, he wasn't a dominant person. He was just sweet. And so about a year later, he was killed by a white policeman. And this was a little harder, So I had that same thought. I know these people. Who did I know in this case? Where I was in my first year of college, which was junior college, and I was working part-time somewhere, and where I worked had some people who were African American and some people who were white, and immediately everyone went into their camps. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be at the table and to talk to each other. And it was very challenging. I was really young, and I had that same thought. I couldn't believe that the white police officer was all bad, and I couldn't believe that Archie was all bad either. And yet, this police officer killed my friend. And yet, I also remembered that my friend, at least again at school friend, in class, I had noticed that he had grown his pinky nail out really long. And the reason that the cop was chasing him was, it was said that he was either using or dealing with cocaine. So then I really did know these people, remembering his fingernail, which could be a sign that he was, using cocaine. Certainly was not something you saw on all musicians who often kept their fingernails short. So I know these people. It got more complex. And then I thought of it again as after I first left the country. I was gone for 3 years the first time I went away. And when I came back, I found myself, I visited my friend Deborah, who lived in Columbus, Georgia, and she wanted to go to a bar, which is not something Deborah ever wanted to do, but for some reason she wanted to go out to a bar, and I said I would go with her. And we were outside the bar, and I couldn't go in. And she was kind of frustrated with me, and she was like, she said my name then, and she was like, Tenku, but you know these people. And I was like, exactly, that's why I can't go in. I was afraid. So then what does that mean for us as Buddhists? We know these people. How are we going to meet? If our fear keeps us out of the room or out of the conversation, as in the case after Archie's death or with Cindy, we can't participate in the conversation, then we can't really know these people. But the conversation is pretty uncomfortable. Again, following Archie's death, where it worked split very neatly into black and white with people's opinions. And I found myself, even though I'm white, kind of in the middle. But what else happened was our whole town split very evenly into black and white. And our town was very small, population of under 3,000, divided very neatly in the middle by railroad tracks. And on this side were the black people, and this side were the white people. And the town then split, and there was a riot for 3 days. Things burned. There were police in the street. There were things smashed, and it was very tense. So how then do I be present to this? I felt like I learned something because I tried to tell one of the black women at work that I know these people. And she was furious. I knew one of those people, and I knew him a little bit. Did I really know him? Did I really know her? And on the other side, did I really know the police officer either? If we take ourselves out completely, then we can't participate in the conversation. If we take ourselves too far in, where we are the instigators of the anger, then we can't participate in the conversation. We have to find a way to be present with patience and without the anger that causes so much harm. And that's really challenging. It doesn't mean that we have to get rid of all anger. We have to learn to be present to it. And it's something we can learn. We don't have to, it's not magical. We can learn how to do it. So that's the good part, is we can learn how to do it. And the trick is it's not ours. We don't have to accept it. We don't have to be personally invested. The Buddha said, your anger is a gift I choose not to receive. When I was at the women's monastery, there was one nun who just really didn't like me. And she was often quite angry, and I was often her target. And she was more high. She was higher than me in the hierarchy. So she was somewhat of a threat, although she couldn't hurt me, like what was she going to do to me except yell at me, which was very unpleasant, but whatever. So I used to envision her as, when she would get started on me, as a little, one of those little wind up toys, with the twists on the back, and wasn't very big. She wasn't a big person, but she would really get going, so then I would, like, the anger had twisted, and then she would be like, and that's how I started to see her. And so the image got to where it would kind of crack me up each time that it happened, like I was like, oh, here she goes again. Take us on! And it was really, so then it became, instead of being invested in that, I was able to stay present to it and not to take it so seriously. And I recall, I went back to visit there after I had left, and she still had it in for me, but she had risen in ranking. So I walked into the monk's hall for the morning zazen, went in, and right away she started targeting me in front of everyone. And I had to physically restrain myself because I was also really happy to see her. I felt like I should just go over to her and kiss her on the cheek. Like, what would that do to a Japanese person to do that, in front of everyone? I think it would have made her head explode, but still, it wasn't my anger, it was hers. So I was able to step out of it. So that's a bit of a teaser for what I want to say about anger. And we can unpack that a little bit more, but I want to leave a few minutes. See, I didn't succeed here. I wanted to leave a few minutes to talk about Sojin Roshi, and I actually didn't. But I'll still say something about him, because I loved him so much. He's somebody that, I see these tributes to him online, and they say, well, I saw him once when he gave a talk at blah, blah, blah. That's not my relationship to him. He's somebody I was very close to. And, I was just, so then I felt like I don't want to do a public tribute. I don't even want to do his memorial service yet, which is awful. I'm so, like, I haven't done the proper service. Yeah. See, look.